Հարկելի ունգոտններ, կոֆի արբիտ Սուզի զրույցին բարի եկացեք։ Այսօրվան իմ հյուրս պիտելլա աշխատասեր խելացի երիտասարդ կանադայեն Cassandra Tavukciyանը։ Ինքը մեզ պիտի պատմի մեր նշանավոր հայգիներու մասին։ Ես Cassandra-ն իր հայրիկին միջոցով ջանոցած է եւ ինքը ասա որ իմ աղջիկս ասանք բաներու հետ կսպաղվի եւ ես ալ իրեն հետ կապեցի ուզեցի որ մենք ալ սորվինք ինչ աշխատանքներ գտնենք Cassandra. Okay, Cassandra, welcome to our program. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for the opportunity.
Very good. Very good. Okay, let's start now. Who is Cassandra? Tell us about your childhood, your background, your family. Tell us about you, please.
Sure. So I was born in Vancouver, Canada, into a Armenian Canadian family. My dad was born in Montreal, into a Bosahai family that had immigrated to Canada in the late 50s. And my mom was born in Istanbul and immigrated to Canada in her teens. So I grew up in Vancouver, but before that, my family was in Montreal, and that's kind of where the core of my family started in Canada. And I grew up in a very creative household. My father is a graphic designer by trade, but he's also been very involved in Armenian antiques. Oh. And he's been collecting Armenian carpets and ceramics and metalwork for over 10 years. He's been collecting and selling as well. He has a business, High Antiques, which he'll be very happy that I told you about and told everyone about.
I'm going to have a program with him too.
Yeah, you should. He'd love to talk about it, I'm sure.
I found you through him, so
yeah. Yeah.
He's getting ready for my program.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's very knowledgeable. He's learned a lot all on his own, just self-taught, learning about the Armenian role in carpet making, Armenian production of carpet making over the years in Turkey and all over. So he has an amazing collection that he's amassed and a lot of knowledge that he's gained. So I grew up with exposure to Armenian history and culture through my family. And then my mom, on my mom's side, she's a pianist. She plays the piano. She was born in Istanbul, as I said, and she learned piano from an Armenian piano teacher in Bolis, Valentin Mazlum. I don't know if you're familiar with.
I came to the United States when I was very little.
Oh, okay. So yeah, my mom was born in 61, so 60s, 70s in Bolis. She was taught by Valentin Mazlum. There was a book written about her actually by Aras Press about Valentin. She went to Paris, learned piano, and yeah, so they wrote a book on her biography. So my mom learned piano from her in Bolis and then moved to Montreal, and that's where she went to McGill, where she studied piano and performing. And she's been teaching piano ever since then. She's been teaching for over 40 years now, I think. And so, yeah, that was the household I grew up in, very creative, very supportive of the arts. I have a younger brother as well, who's an artist. He works on mural painting. Maybe you could interview him too.
You have been a lucky child.
Yeah. So very creative, very artistic. And yeah, growing up, I learned all about Armenian painters and artists and musicians. My mom would play Babajanyan and Khachadurian on the piano. And my dad would introduce me to Parajanov and Arshil Gorky, all the famous Armenian artists that we have been very proud of in our history. And then I started to become interested in photography. That was kind of my gateway. So I studied photography in Vancouver. I learned about how to develop prints and negatives in the darkroom, about the history of photography. And then I wasn't really sure what I was going to do afterwards. And I found a program at Ryerson University in Toronto. And that's where I studied photography and film preservation and collections management. So it's more about how to preserve archival collections in museums and galleries and libraries, and how to manage different kinds of collections, and about the history of photography. And then I wanted to write a thesis on something related to Armenian history. So I looked at Armenian photographers in the Ottoman Empire.
Oh.
not sure if you're familiar with this part of our history, but Armenians and Greeks also were photographers in the Ottoman Empire. So they had studios all over Istanbul, even Cairo, Jerusalem. All over, Armenians were photographers during this period. And they were very instrumental in the production and the practice of photography. So I found that very interesting. I thought, why Armenians? Why are they so interested in photography? Like, what was it? So I unpacked that history and I did research on a few photographers at the time. And I learned that for a number of different reasons, Armenians were in a very good position to pursue photography because they were minorities in the Ottoman Empire. They didn't have access to, the military or other kinds of positions that were more for the majority positions. So a lot of Armenians did artisanal trade. A lot of Armenians were, in chemistry and, dentistry and different fields like that, and, scientific trades, but also artistic trades. So photography kind of fused the scientific and artistic trade, and Armenians were well positioned to pursue this art of photography. So I looked at that history and I wrote a thesis on that. So I've always been interested in combining my academic and personal interests with a focus on Armenian history too. And then that's where Armenian women artists kind of came up. So I started the project in 2018.
No, let's go
Okay.
after the presentation because
Okay.
I'm impressed. Bravo.
Thank you.
What is your other occupation besides this works that you do?
So I work at a museum here in Ottawa. It's the Canadian Museum of History. It's in Quebec, technically. So I work in the archives of the museum. So I work on digitizing our collections, essentially. And I've been there for 2 years in this position. Prior to that, I was in Toronto, working at a very small historical society. So I work on helping museums digitize their collections and making them available to the public, essentially. So I've always been in the cultural sphere, and I've been in this position at the museum for 2 years.
I'm very impressed. Well, bravo, Casey. Okay, Cassandra, can we start with your presentation? Then we talk about.
Sure. So I can share with you my screen here. So this is the project Armenian Women Artists. I started it in 2018, and it was more of a personal interest for me. So I as I said, I grew up learning about Armenian artists during my childhood, but I didn't really know about the women contribution. So I started doing research on our history, and I discovered hundreds of Armenian women artists from our history, both in Armenia and the diaspora, which I try to focus on as well. And I was just very impressed with the range of artistic expression, but also the geographical range, because the Armenian diaspora is so diverse and global. I found artists in Iraq, in Iran, South America, Jerusalem, all over the world. Really, Armenians have contributed to the artistic and cultural sphere wherever they were born into, or whatever culture they were born into, or country they were born into. So I on an almost daily basis, I share different artists, different artworks from our history. And my goal is to bring awareness and recognition of these artists. And it's a very educational approach. So I can show you a few examples. So for Mother's Day, it was Mother's Day in the Arab world, primarily Lebanon, Syria, Palestine. It was Mother's Day on just 5 days ago. So I shared this portrait of Armine Galens. She was born in Damascus, and she moved to the Soviet Union in the 40s with her husband Tavukciyan. And together they joined the Artistic Armenian Union in the Soviet Union, and they produced many paintings over the years. They had some challenges during this period. Moving to Soviet Armenia from Lebanon was a kind of a cultural shock for them, but they were able to integrate into the community there. And there's a museum now in Yerevan on the Galens couple, on Armenian and Tavukciyan. So I shared this photo of her and her son. This was taken in Beirut in 1944. for Mother's Day. This is another one I shared for Mother's Day. It's a ceramic tile by Maryam Aslamazyan. She was born in France, but she made her career in Jerusalem with her husband, Balian. They were one of the most influential families in Jerusalem, and they have a studio still open today where they produce ceramic tiles like this. And her style was very instrumental in the family business. So this is a tile that she made of Madonna and Child that I shared. And this is the most recent post I did on a Romanian Armenian poet. So she was born in Bucharest, and she wrote for many different literary magazines, and she focused on our Romanian Armenian history. So I try to show Armenians from all over the world, different positions, different professions, whether it's poetry, writing, ceramics. I try to show the full range and bring this awareness to the public. I can see what else there is. This was an interesting figure since you're Bolsahai too, Toto Karaca. I don't know if you're familiar. You're probably familiar with Toto Karaca. She was an actress born in Bolis in Constantinople, and she was born into an Armenian family. Her mother was also an actress. And she was very, very important in the Istanbul theater scene. So she participated in theater productions, and then she went into film. And she's also the mother of Cem Karaca, who was a Turkish musician who was part of the Anatolian rock movement. So I try to bring awareness to these more hidden figures, like unexpected hidden figures that were of Armenian descent, but they were, on the outside, they kind of had to assimilate in a way to whatever culture they were, or nation that they were born into. In this case, it was Turkey. So here's a clip of her from a movie. She had a very playful personality, and she would perform in all these films, and she was very well loved by the general Turkish audiences. And but she was of Armenian descent. So I try to bring that awareness and recognition. It's a scene from a movie, and here she is singing on Turkish television. She sang, this is a French song that she performed in the 70s. So I get a lot of mixed, not mixed reviews, but sometimes when it comes to the Turkish Armenian community, sometimes there's a bit of resistance from certain followers that don't really understand why it's important to share these figures. But I think it's very important still to,
Cassandra, do you have any, can you, I know I got some pictures and information from your website about Kalfayan Mayrabet, Sırpı Mayrabet, that she was founder of the Kalfayan Vorpanots.
Oh, yes, I did.
Can you show that and tell us about, because I went that school, boarding school.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah.
Yes, please.
So yes, I shared this on February 17th. That was when she was born. So she was a very beloved Armenian nun and philanthropist, Sırpı Kalfayan, the eldest of 6 children. I'm just reading the biography here. So she was ordained in 1840 at the age of 18, and she founded a professional school for girls where she taught them skills like handicrafts and needlework. And she helped a lot of orphans who were, didn't have a home and needed support. So she was very important in the community there. And then, yes, as you know, she founded the school, which educated a lot of children. And yeah, a very important figure for sure. She also did embroidery work as well, which I found kind of surprising. So she was very creative in addition to her work, her social work, helping children. She was also an artist herself, which was kind of interesting. So she dedicated her life to educating orphan children, and still today the school exists. So yeah, a very important figure. And there was a documentary made by the Hrant Dink Foundation on the school, and it gives a background of the history. And I know it was confiscated by the Turkish government as well at one point. And now it's still part of the orphanage. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to introduce these figures that most of us don't know about. I mean, I just learned about her a few months ago myself. So there's a lot that's out there that needs to be shared and learned. And Yeah.
I was graduated from that school in 1969, 1970.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, it's a very important school.
I was proud of being proud to be in that school, you know.
I'm sure. Yeah. What else? So yeah, I share artworks as well. This was an Armenian artist from the Soviet Union. Very beautiful paintings, and it's always a pleasure to share these works that are often unknown or unrecognized as well. This is an Armenian poet, Yevprime Avedisyan. She was born in Constantinople into an upper class family, and she studied at the Makruyats school, and she learned French as well. She wrote her first novel, Dans une hutte, in Massis, in the Armenian newspaper Massis. And she spent some time in Switzerland after the Hamidian massacres. She had to leave Bolis, but she came back and then moved to Paris in the end, where she spent the rest of her life, and she continued to contribute to the French Armenian literary circles. So yeah, I mean, there's so many out there, and I'm learning things every day from our history that really inspire me, and I hope inspire others as well. There's so many out there. This is an interesting figure. She was also Romanian Armenian, Ana Aslan. She was a biologist and a physician and a professor, and she was she was part of the kind of cosmetic field as well. Like, she produced a lot of cosmetic products in Romania, and she focused on elderly care, and very interesting figure as well. And a lot of people don't know a lot of Armenians don't know even about our own history, you know, including myself. So I'm always trying to, you know, teach myself and educate myself about our history. And yeah, she founded an institute in Romania that's still around today. And she contributed a lot of scientific research, and yeah, she dedicated her life to the field. So I try to share things that are relevant to today as well. So, you know, if it's a particular day, like if it's a day of Arabic language, or if it's a day of education, I try to highlight certain figures for specific days that come up, mostly from the United Nations. It kind of gives me a bit of structure to choose what to share next. This is an Armenian educator in Iran. So the Iranian Armenian community is really interesting too, because it was often the Armenians who were the first in the community to do certain things. So the first actress in Iran was an Armenian. The first, in this case, you know, the first daycare kindergarten was an Armenian in Iran. So a lot of the times these Armenian women were the first of their communities to pursue certain, you know, social developments, or you know, certain cultural things. They were often the first of the community to do that, which I find really impressive and interesting. So she was an educator, and she founded the first daycare for children. So she really focused on children's education. And she got permission from Iran to establish the daycare from the Tehran Ministry of Culture. And she taught, you know, 400 students throughout her career, which is really, really impressive. And unfortunately, the school was taken over by the Ministry of Education in the 70s after the revolution. But, you know, still to this day, there are students that had her as their kindergarten teacher, and they remember her very fondly. And she ended up moving to Glendale, California, like so many Iranians did at the time. This is another figure, another educator, Zadoui Sarachijian. She was born in Mexico to Armenian genocide survivors and immigrated to the States in the 30s. And she ended up teaching at UCLA for many years. And she founded a program on Armenian archaeology, specifically, was her kind of field of study. And she was very dedicated to education. A lot of Armenian women were dedicated to education, which is something that I've learned, education of children. And it was like their lifelong pursuit to spread knowledge and awareness of Armenian history. So we have a lot to thank from these women, a lot. You know, they deserve a lot of credit and for all that they've pursued. This is another Armenian educator from Iran. Well, she was technically born in Tiflis into an Armenian family, but then moved to Iran, where she opened a school as well for children, a daycare center.
It's still active, the school?
I think it is, yes. What's the name of the school? I'm pretty sure it is still active, or a version of it. Saravarian School is what it's called now, and the family, the descendants of Margarit, they're helping to preserve the family legacy, and they have a website, and they do a lot of the family history, and yeah, the school still exists to this day. And she had a national funeral as well when she passed away in Iran. So they were very beloved figures in their community, whether it was the Armenian community or the greater community that they were a part of. Yeah, very inspiring for sure. This is another piece by Maryam Aslamazyan, who again was born in France, but made her career in Jerusalem. And still to this day, the Balyan studio is still managed by the family. And they create these beautiful hand-painted tiles and ceramic pieces for businesses or for homes. This is one that she made, the Armenian Mosaic ceramic tile mural. So she created her own designs, and she had an exhibition at the Smithsonian, actually, in, when was it, 92, Views of Paradise. And it included this beautiful 22-piece panel. And it went around different museums all over, from Boston, Israel, it went all over, and it was very successful. So yeah, I mean, it's an incredible history that we have, and I think, you know, bringing awareness to this history is very important to me. This is another Bolis-based artist. She was, what's her name here? Sirvart Kalpakyan Karamanuk. So she was a pianist born in Üsküdar. She studied piano at a very young age. And she composed many beautiful pieces, mostly choral works and, you know, chorus and orchestra compositions. I'm not sure if the sound works here. But... So I try to share music and film as well to bring the artwork to life.
Can we listen a little bit?
Sure, of course.
Very young in him. How old was she?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
She looks very young, sister.
Yeah, this was an early photograph of her when she was young. She just passed away recently. Well, she was born in 1912, and when did she pass away? She passed away in 2008 in Bolis. Wow. And this song was called Spring, Karun Barek, that she composed in 1956. She was also a teacher too, so she taught a lot of Armenian students and in Bolis. And there was a book written by her, about her, by Araksi Saryan. Wrote a book about her life and her work, and it's available online. So this was for World Composer Day. I shared her. This is another composer, Soviet Armenian, born in Rostov-on-Don. There were a lot of Soviet composers, you know, obviously during the Soviet Union, a lot of music was composed and a lot of musicians, you know, really came to life during this period. You can listen to a bit here too. To give you an idea. And she taught also music at the Gomidas Conservatory of Yerevan. And she also published work on Khatudurian as well. And this is another Bolis-born composer, Gohari Gazarosyan. She was born in 1907 in Constantinople, and she studied under a Hungarian professor. And she went to the Yesayan Armenian school as well, where she graduated in 1922, and then she studied in Paris. A lot of the Bolis-born musicians and composers studied in Paris, I've noticed, and then came back where they pursued their careers. And she also did a lot of chamber music and vocal works. This is a piece that is called Bhartavar Transfiguration. You can listen to a little bit. She was very inspired by Gomidas as well, as you can kind of hear the influence there in terms of the chants and the liturgical chants. And she died in Paris, this composer. And one of the things I enjoy, I really like seeing all the different comments that come up too. Like sometimes people will add some context, or I'll learn something that I didn't know from some of the followers, and it's very collaborative. Like I learn a lot from different people who follow the page as well. So it's quite collaborative in that sense. This is a very important figure in our history, Arsha Luis or Aurora Mardiganian. She was born in just near Karpert in the Ottoman Empire, and she survived the Armenian genocide. But she was separated from her family, and her family was murdered, very unfortunately. And she ended up going to the United States, and she wrote a memoir called Ravished Armenia, where she told about her story. And eventually it was turned into a silent film. She was cast in the lead role of the film. The film was called Auction of Souls, and it was produced in Hollywood. And it became sort of a pivotal film during the genocide, or about the genocide, and it received very high, box office records. So she was in the film, but unfortunately, she was also taken advantage of quite a bit by the film industry, and she was quite emotionally fragile because of what she went through, and she kind of got taken advantage of. But the film did help bring some humanitarian relief to the genocide and to the descendants of the genocide. And she ended up dying in Los Angeles. But she was quite abandoned near the end of her life, unfortunately. So a lot of these figures are forgotten most of the time. And that's why I think it's really important to share their stories. This is an oral history interview that was done with her. You can listen to a bit of it.
Made the second exile with them and killed them before reaching to the desert. And burned them all.
Could you tell about your family that perished?
A parish, that's where my mother was perished, and then they killed right before. I didn't see the body. I found the body I didn't see right before my eyes. But my aunt, my two aunts, was killed right before my eyes. They tie up my hair, and I said, and then they killed. Please, I said, save them. No, that sooner or later you're gonna die. There will be no one single Armenian to live. We're going to kill all your dogs, all your gavels, and all these kind of words they were calling and yelling and all, and whipping me and using those horsewhip. It was so painful and all. And that's the way they want to finish us. So they will have all our land, our country, and then wipe off the Christianity, both ways. I was so small, I won't be able to know many other things, you know.
This is part of a larger project that was done. I believe it was at the Shoah Foundation. They interviewed a lot of Armenian survivors of the genocide and did oral history testimonies to remember and to honor their stories. And a book was written about Aurora as well in 2016 by the then director of the Armenian Genocide Museum Institute of Yerevan. And yeah, to commemorate her story and to give gratitude to her. And now the Aurora Prize was created in her honor as well. So yeah, I try to share, the positives and also the negative stories, from our history, the more painful ones that are, still important to share. And it's been a big learning experience for me too, definitely to learn about these women from our history. This was for World Arabic Language Day, so I focused on 3 Armenian women from the Arab world who sang in Arabic. This is Seta Hagopian. She was from Iraq, born in Basra and made her career in Baghdad. She was kind of like the Fairuz of Iraq, a lot of people called her. She was very, very famous, and now she lives in Toronto. She had to leave Iraq, unfortunately, due to the war. This is another singer from Cairo. So she was born in Cairo, Nelly Artin Kalfayan, and she was very famous during the kind of 50s, 60s. She had a show during Ramadan that went on. She did these playful skits and songs and dancing, and she was a very beloved, she's still alive today, a very beloved figure, very comedic, had a lot of personality, as you can tell from here. And she was part of a very creative family too. Her cousin was also an actress and her sister was a singer. So a very, very creative family in Cairo. And then I also showed, oh yes, Afifa Iskandar. She was also from Iraq, born into a Greek and Armenian family. And she was very famous as well in the Iraqi music scene, very well respected in her field. And she passed away in 2012 in Baghdad. She had a very magnetic stage presence and a beautiful voice as well, singing in Arabic. So yeah, it's been like 4 or 5 years working on this project.
How many posts do you have?
Oh, a lot, over 1,000, I think. 1,120 posts since 2018, and it's just growing every day from there. This is another interesting woman. She was Marika Ninou. She was Greek. She was one of the leading Greek rebetiko singers. And she was born, her family was from Izmir originally, Izmir, Smyrna, and they were escaping the fire of Smyrna in 1922 and ended up in Greece, in Kokinia. And she grew up in the kind of refugee neighborhood and went to the Armenian school, and then her voice kind of brought attention She learned how to chant all the songs in the Armenian church. And then she ended up becoming one of the most famous Greek singers of her time. She married an Armenian man first, Haig Mesrobian, who ended up unfortunately leaving her for Soviet Armenia in the 40s, left her behind with her son, but she ended up remarrying. And
do you have Zabel Yesayan's?
I do, yes.
Can you please show that to us?
Sure. Let's see, I did her somewhat recently.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes. So she's probably one of the most famous Armenian writers in general, man or woman, I'd say. She was a novelist, a poet, activist, educator, born in 1878 in Üsküdar, and was born into a family that really encouraged education. Her father was very supportive of her to get an education. And she went to the Sorbonne at the age of 17 in Paris. So she was involved in the French literary field as well. And most importantly, she wrote about the Adana massacres in 1902. She was sent there to kind of report on the scene and to write down eyewitness accounts as well. And then she moved to Soviet Armenia in 1933, where she taught at the Yerevan State University. And unfortunately, she was part of Stalin's purges in the 30s, and she died under unknown circumstances, most likely in Siberia. So she was a pioneer and, for women's rights, women liberation, but also human rights in general. And yeah, she's definitely up there in terms of intellectuals in the Western Armenian sphere for sure. And many of her books have been published and translated to English today. Are the AWA, Armenian International Women's Association. They've published many of her books, so you can read her works in English as well. Yeah, very, very important figure for sure. And this was a book that was recently published. It's an Western Armenian children's book that shares the story of Zabel Yesayan. It's written in Western Armenian, which is very important as well. And it introduces young children to Yesayan. It helps with the Armenian language, and it kind of gives an inspirational story about Yesayan. So just published, I think, last year, I believe, and it can be purchased today with some really beautiful illustrations, also by an Armenian artist. So yeah, her story lives on today in many different forms, for sure. Yesayan. This is a portrait of Yesayan doing some needlework. So in addition to writing and teaching, she also did needlework, and some of her embroideries are still preserved today at the museums in Yerevan. The Sharans Museum of Literature and Arts is where her archive is kept. Yeah, and her daughter Sophie was also very important. Her daughter Sophie helped preserve her legacy in her writing and to preserve her legacy. This is an artwork by a Russian Armenian artist, Yelena Mikhailovna Bebutova. She was born into a noble Georgian Armenian family from Tiflis, and then she moved to Moscow, where she made her career. This is a portrait of her by her husband, who was also an artist. So she worked in the kind of Cubist style in Paris, which was very popular at the time. And this is her work during the more socialist realism period of the Soviet Union, which was very popular at the time. So she kind of had to abandon her avant-garde style for the more socialist realism style that was prominent during the Soviet Union. This is an interesting figure. Paris Pishmish, also Bozai.
Bosa. Cassandra, I'm sure the other artists are moved from Turkey too, I guess.
Are not from Turkey?
Yeah, mostly, I'm sure they.
There's a whole range. There's a range for sure. Like a lot of the ones I show are from Hayastan, like Soviet Armenia, the Middle East, South America, I have a fondness for the Bolshoi ones just because of my family history. I find it interesting, but yeah, I mean they're from all over. But this woman in particular, Paris Pishmish, she was born in Belize and educated there, but she made her career in Mexico. So she moved to Mexico with her husband, but she was actually the first woman to receive a PhD from the science faculty in Istanbul, which is a very impressive, accomplishment. She was from quite a established family as well, where education was a high priority. And then she settled in Mexico in 1948, and that's where she became the first professional astronomer, male or female, in Mexico. And she was, very instrumental in the field. She worked at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and she taught many students, and she acted as a real role model for women in the field of astronomy.
Do you have any Armenian activists for women's freedom?
Definitely a lot during the Ottoman Empire, for sure. There were a lot of women that were very, focused on women's rights. Haiganu is definitely one of the sort of iconic figures of this period. She was influenced by the French feminism and European feminism movement, and she tried to, bring that influence into the Istanbul community. She had, it's been a while since I've shared her, but she founded the Haygin journal, which was for Armenian women specifically. And they wrote about women's rights, women's liberation, the conflicting role between a woman being at the home or working, these kinds of conflicting, positions that women found themselves in, balancing that role between mother and intellectual. And so she was part of that movement for sure, and definitely an activist in that sense. Haiganu was very important. There's so many. This is another astronomer, but from Iran. So she was similar to Paris Pishmish, but from Iran. And she received a PhD in atmospheric physics from the Sorbonne in Paris. And she was one of the first female astrophysicists or astronomers in Iran, and from a very, very important Armenian family in Iran too, Terian. Her mother was an Armenian actress in Iran as well. So very important family, and she dedicated herself to the field of astronomy, and she taught for 30 years, and she actually dedicated her home to Armenians in Julfa for students that didn't have proper accommodation. So she was very generous with her time as well, and gave back to the community in that sense. This is a painting by Maryam Aslamazyan. She was the first artist that I came across during my research. So she was from the Soviet Union, Soviet Armenia, born near Gyumri, and she's considered to be one of the greatest Soviet women artists of her time. So she painted Armenian culture, these really beautiful colors, and she did self-portraits, she did still lives and portraiture as well. And her museum is in Gyumri today in Armenia. You can go see her paintings along with her sister, Eranui, who was also an artist. And she represented the Soviet Union as a cultural diplomat as well. So she traveled all over the world to represent the Soviet Union through her artwork. So she's definitely a big inspiration for me in the page, and her work is quite incredible. This is an American Armenian, Arlene Francis. So most people wouldn't know from her name, but she was born into an Armenian family, Kazanjian, born in Boston, and she became a very well-known radio presenter and TV personality during the 50s and 60s. She hosted many different shows, and she was like a pioneer for women in television in America. She was one of the highest earning game show panelists in the 1950s. And she was, a real household name for American television and radio.
What are your sources, Cassandra? How do you find all this information?
So a lot of it is done online. I rely a lot on Wikipedia. They have, Wikipedia has a lot of all the sources there. I usually use Wikipedia, but in non-English languages. So the Armenian Wikipedia, the Farsi Wikipedia, the French one, they have different sources that wouldn't come up in the English searches. So Wikipedia has been an amazing resource for me just to identify the figures, to find them. And then from there, I dig into the sources and trace back different sources. In terms of the paintings, I use the National Gallery of Armenia. They have a whole database on their website where you can find paintings from their whole collection. It's all online on their website. And then I rely on a lot of friends as well. Like a lot of friends will message me, oh, I know this artist. They'll recommend artists to me that I didn't know about before. Sometimes family members, some people will say, oh, my grandma was an artist during this period, and here's some of her work. So it's very collaborative in that sense. So yeah, I learn a lot from people who follow the page as well.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak French, I'd say intermediate, a little bit of Armenian, not that much. And then a little bit of Turkish. Like I understand a few Turkish.
So it helps you to find all this information.
Yes, the languages, it opens up a whole new world when you have the language skills, and I rely on translations most of the time. But yeah, definitely the more languages you know, the more information you can find in that sense. Definitely. And I try not to limit myself in terms of, just art. I mean, it's called Armenian Women Artists, but it's a very open field, an open, I try not to limit myself. So I show astronomers or architects. It doesn't have to be specifically like an artist. It can be any kind of woman who, expresses herself creatively. This woman who just passed away last year, I believe, Suzy Dermanuelian. She was an archaeologist in the United States, and she contributed to the research of Armenian architecture. And she grew up in Boston, and then she ended up getting her PhD at Boston University at the age of 52 as well, which is quite later on in her life. She had her children, and then she went back to school to learn the field. And she wrote on the Gehart Monastery in Kotaik province of Armenia. So she was very dedicated to Armenian art and archaeology and architecture as well. And there was a documentary done on her called Lost Treasures of Christianity, the Ancient Monuments of Armenia. So it's a documentary on Armenian architecture featuring Suzy Dermanuelian. She also wrote about Armenian carpets too. My dad has a book that was written by her on Armenian carpets. So she contributed to a lot of different fields within Armenian art history. And just another scene from the documentary here. She did a lot of research trips to Armenia where she did all her field work, and a very impressive figure.
I was going to ask you about her.
Oh yeah.
Because your photography, your field photography too.
Yeah, definitely. I love learning about the photographers as well, like because of my own interest. See if I can find. Oh, Anita Conti is an incredible figure. So she was France's first oceanographer, female oceanographer. So she was born in just outside of Paris into a pretty upper class Armenian family. She was born Anita Karakotian, and she married a French diplomat, Marcel Conti, which is where she got her last name from. And she was one of the only women that would go on these research vessels. So she would go with the fishermen to do research on different, oceanographics, scientific. She would study the different fish patterns. She would study about, the ocean safety and preserving the, different fish species. She was an environmentalist, and she was also a photographer too. So she taught, self-taught photographer. She taught herself. And this is her carte de presse for when she went on the excursions. So a very, very impressive figure, as I always say. A book was just published about her, including her photographs recently in January, and there was an exhibition of her work as well. So this is her here on the boats that she would do the research on, and she was, very close with the fishermen that she worked with. They respected her a lot for her work. Yeah, for being the only woman in her field to do that, it's quite incredible. And she took over 70,000 photographs over her whole career. So she has quite an amazing archive of photographs from all her exploration. She went to Africa, she went to all over the world she went, and did research.
About you, do you visit all around the world, or
Do I visit?
photography?
It's been a while, but I did a semester abroad in Scotland in 2013 during my studies, and I took some photographs there. I went to Istanbul also in 2013, was my last time there, and I took some photographs there. Yeah, I mean, I love photography, but I don't always have the time to do it as much as I used to. So now I just focus on doing more research in this way. But
Cassandra, I think you should come to our tour that we will go with your parents.
I'd love to. Yeah, I really do
We'll
want.
take a lot of pictures.
Yeah, for
about
sure.
our history.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll try my best to come. Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other questions about specific people or.
No, let's talk about your work then.
My work?
I mean, let's talk over.
Just keep going. Okay.
No, I mean, we can close this and let's talk, see what about you.
Okay.
It was beautiful. I am proud of you. I'm very impressed with your work.
Thank you.
Wow. So you've been doing this 4.5 years, you said something like that?
Yes, in 2018 I started.
Wow. Okay, and you said about how many posts you have. How does the people contact you? I mean, do they want information from you? I'm sure they are.
Yeah, so through Instagram, through the app, I get a lot of messages and questions. People share different artists that they come across with me so that I can share them as well. So yeah, through Instagram, but also just through email, I'll receive some really nice emails giving nice feedback or suggestions, or just giving general support for the project. I think it means a lot to a lot of people, because it's rare to come across these figures in one place. That's what I try to do. I try to make it all in one place so it's accessible and that people can learn and share the information. But yeah, it's mostly through Instagram that I have a lot of conversations with different people from all over about these women and their work.
Did you go do any presentations in any organizations or something other than Zoom?
Well, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, the Armenian Institute in London invited me to do a lecture presentation on the project. So I introduced the project, and then I highlighted 5 women, some of my favorite figures, and I gave a little bit of biography about their work and shared some clips of their work to introduce the project. That was the most recent one. I would love to go in person and travel and meet some people, meet people that I talk to online. I mean, I'd love to go to Armenia to actually go into the archives and museums and, find more women that are unknown. I'd love to go to Bolis too to learn more
I
about the
think this is an opportunity for you, Cassandra, if you come this summer with your parents. They're
nice.
planning to go to Armenia too.
I know, yes. I'd love to go, yeah. If I can take the time off, yeah.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. Is there any other young people like you that they do this kind of work?
There's a lot of different accounts out there that focus on Armenian culture and history. A lot of really good accounts. Like there's one account that does just Armenian film, for instance, or Armenian cinema, and they share different filmmakers and films, and they educate the public about Armenian cinema. There's so many out there that I follow that really inspire me as well. So I say there's like a real collective effort to share Armenian history and culture in a productive and accessible way. what else is there? The Armenian cinema is the one that comes to mind.
I'm sure you talk to with each other and help
We
each
do, yeah, we do for sure.
I'm
share
very
work.
impressed with your work and your
Thank you.
interest.
Thank you. There's one page on Armenian academics, so they share.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have any other, part that you're interested in history,
Yeah.
Armenian history?
Armenian academics page, they share awareness to Armenian academics all over the world, the research that they're doing, mostly contemporary figures that are teaching different subjects. I've also learned a lot about contemporary artists too, like artists that are working right now, Armenian women that are creating art in Armenia and the diaspora. I've spoken with a lot of different artists. It'd be really nice to do an exhibition maybe one day to, bring this all to life. Because so much of the work that I do is online and you kind of lose that human interaction and connection. So I think
I know it's important too.
Mhm.
Maybe if you decide to come to Bolis, maybe we can ask an organization to do a presentation
that'd be nice. Yeah, that'd be
for
lovely.
them. But if you decide to come, then we can arrange something. I'm sure people will be interested.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for sure out there. Yeah. Okay.
Cassandra, you remember you had one program. Somebody asked you about Armenian Ashur lady.
Oh yes.
Did you detail and did you find anything after that program?
No, unfortunately, no, I didn't. That was during the Armenian Institute lecture. My friend Arpine Haroyan had recommended,
Yeah.
but I can't remember the name now. But she's a contemporary singer right now that's doing it. But otherwise, I'm not familiar with any others, unfortunately. But it's a very interesting
Her
subject.
name was Ashok Lailin, something like that. Another person mentioned about it.
Arpine Haroyan, she would know the name.
Ashok Lailin.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I took note of it.
Yeah.
So can you tell us all the people that how they can find your page?
Sure.
Tell us about your page so they can look for you and
Sure.
follow
So
you.
it's called Armenian_women_artists, and you can find it on Instagram. I also have a Twitter account as well, which I'm getting back into. It's Haygin Artists, so HAYGIN Artists. I can send you the link that you can add in the description. And that's basically where I'm at, Twitter and Instagram. And I have an email too, if anyone wants to email me. It's armenianwomenartists@gmail.com. I'm always happy to hear from people and have discussions.
I can add under the
Sure.
program. How about Facebook? A lot of people use Facebook page.
I'm not on Facebook that often. I do have an account, but I don't really post on it very often.
Because our age group, they don't
I know.
Instagram or something.
Yeah, I know.
The page is more like people.
It's true.
Our age people.
Yeah, it's true. I should start to.
I think you should post there too. So
it's a good idea. Yeah, there's a whole different audience there that I can bring awareness to. Yeah, for sure.
Anything else do you want to tell us?
Well, I guess I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, Suzy, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share these women, and I'm very grateful for the support I've gotten. Really lovely comments and feedback that helped me to keep going, and yeah, it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding work. I'm very proud to share these women and to recognition to them. I think it's very important. It's important for us to know our history as Armenians. The reason that we're in certain situations today, it has to do with a lot of unresolved issues from our past that we're trying to, every day sort through. So I think it's important for us to know our history and to always look back at our history and to learn from it as well. And I think that's very important for this generation, especially. And yeah, just I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing the work. And
I'm proud of you. We should award you too. When your dad told me about you, I was so excited, and
thank you.
so thank you very much. I really appreciate. Thank you for having time and coming and giving this beautiful presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hopefully, see you soon.
Yes, thank you.
Take care and have fun. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye.